friend Don Costa introduced him. He became his producer. So we were down in Miami. He's doing a movie. He calls me up. He says, "Kid, come on, have dinner." I go and have dinner with him. This is like 67.
For more than half a century, Paul Anka has carried stories that few people on earth could imagine. At just 17 years old, he was already a music star. But his fame was only part of the reason he was welcomed into the private world of Frank Sinatra. Known as the chairman of the board, Sinatra ruled music, Las Vegas, and even certain hidden corners of American culture. He had friends in Hollywood, ties with powerful businessmen, and, as many whispered, a long shadow of connections with organized crime. Through it all, Paul Anka was there. He shared dinners, backstage talks, and even late-night confessions with Sinatra. For decades, Anka stayed quiet about what he saw and heard. Whether out of loyalty, fear, or simply respect, he kept the stories locked away. But now, at 84, Anka feels the time has come to finally reveal what life beside Sinatra was really like. These secrets are not only about music, but also about friendships, betrayals, and a world where silence often meant survival. Before understanding why his words today are so explosive, we first need to look back at Anka's own journey. The story of a young boy from Ottawa who dreamed big, worked harder, and stepped into a spotlight that would never fade. Paul Anka's beginnings were far from glamorous. Born on July 30, 1941, in Ottawa, Canada, he was the child of immigrant parents who had arrived with almost nothing. His father, Andrew, left Damascus, Syria, in 1924 with only $15 and a single suitcase. After years of struggle, he opened a small restaurant called Locanda in Ottawa. It became more than just a place to eat. It was a gathering spot for locals, journalists, and politicians. Paul's earliest memories were shaped by this restaurant. By the age of 7, he already knew the names of Canada's political leaders, thanks to the lively conversations he overheard while helping his father greet customers. Money was tight, and the family lived in a small two-bedroom home where cold winters forced Paul to practice singing while wearing mittens. Yet even in those difficult times, music filled his world. His mother, who came from Lebanon, sang him Arabic lullabies that stayed in his memory for life. He absorbed melodies, rhythms, and the lessons of hard work from his parents. By the time he reached high school, Paul was already dreaming beyond Ottawa. He didn't want a safe life in the family restaurant. He wanted something bigger. He wanted music, the stage, and the chance to be remembered. Paul's first steps into music came when he was just 12 years old. Armed with a $14 guitar, he formed a group with 2 classmates, calling themselves the Bobby Suckers. They practiced late into the night in his basement, surrounded by boxes of produce from his father's business. Paul also taught himself piano and began writing songs during math class when he should have been paying attention. By 13, he had already written dozens of songs. His boldness showed early. At one point, he borrowed his mother's car without a license and drove across the river just to perform at a nightclub. Though the police gave him a warning, his performance impressed the audience and won him a small prize. These experiences built his determination. Even when he faced rejection, Paul kept moving forward. By the mid-1950s, he was singing at every local contest, in churches, and even at football games. His mix of church hymns, boogie-woogie, and original melodies made him stand out. One newspaper called him the pint-sized Sinatra, a title that would soon carry more meaning than anyone imagined. While most teenagers worried about school dances and pocket money, Paul was already performing in front of thousands and setting his sights far beyond his hometown. The turning point came in 1956, when Paul convinced his father to give him 6 months to try making it as a professional musician. With only $500 and 2 suitcases, he boarded a train to New York City. 53 days later, his bold move paid off. He auditioned for Don Costa, a producer at ABC Paramount Records, and performed a song he had written called Diana. The song was inspired by a girl he had admired back home, and it carried a mix of youthful longing and catchy melody. Costa knew immediately that it was special. When Diana was released in 1957, it became an international sensation, selling millions of copies and topping charts in multiple countries. In Britain, it held the #1 spot for 9 weeks straight. Practically overnight, Paul Anka was a global star at just 16 years old. He traveled around the world, performing in cities from Sydney to Tokyo, and sometimes earning more than Frank Sinatra himself. Fans screamed his name, threw shoes onto the stage as a way to honor him, and followed him everywhere. Yet behind the fame, Paul was also learning. He watched carefully how contracts worked, how publishing rights brought in money, and how smart moves could outlast any single hit song. These lessons would help him survive long after other teen idols faded away by the early 1960s. The music world was changing. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and a new wave of rock bands were taking over the charts. Suddenly, Anka's style seemed out of fashion, and his songs stopped selling like they once did. Many thought his career was finished before he even turned 22. But Paul Anka was not like other stars. Instead of disappearing, he made one of the smartest business decisions in music history. In 1962, he bought back the rights to all of his old recordings for $250,000. At the time, record executives laughed, saying those songs were worth little. But Anka believed in the long-term value of music. Over the years, those same songs generated millions through commercials, re-releases, and covers. By the 1970s, his catalog had already earned far more than he paid. And by the 2000s, it was worth over $100 million. Anka also began writing songs for other artists, proving that he was more than just a teenage heartthrob. This was the period when he first crossed paths with Frank Sinatra, in a way that would forever change both of their careers. In 1968, at a dinner in Miami, Frank Sinatra confided something to Paul Anka that left him shaken. Sinatra, then 52, looked across the table and said, "Kid, I'm done. One more album, and then I quit." For a man who seemed larger than life, those words carried enormous weight. Anka took them to heart. A few nights later, during a thunderstorm in New York, he sat down at his typewriter and began writing lyrics. He imagined Sinatra's voice delivering a final message to the world, one that captured both pride and regret. The result was My Way. When Sinatra recorded it later that year, it became more than a song, it became his anthem, a symbol of his entire career. My Way would go on to be one of the most famous songs in the world, recorded by countless artists and loved by generations. For Anka, it proved his genius as a songwriter. Yet it also tied him forever to Sinatra's legacy. Behind the music, however, Anka also saw the darker side of Sinatra's world, the mob connections, the unspoken rules, and the dangers of crossing the wrong people. For decades, he stayed silent, but those memories never left him. The world of Las Vegas in the 1960s and 1970s was unlike anything else. It was glamorous on the surface but controlled by powerful forces behind the scenes. Anka, performing nightly on the Strip, saw this world up close. Sinatra was the king of Vegas, and his circle was filled with bodyguards, businessmen, and figures with known mob ties. Loyalty was everything. Musicians whispered about an honor code with teeth, meaning that those who broke it paid a price. Anka remembers stories of musicians who lost their jobs, or worse after, saying the wrong thing about Sinatra. Even small gestures, like speaking too casually to a woman in Sinatra's company, could end a career overnight. To survive in this environment, Anka learned to be careful, respectful, and silent. He kept his head down, played his music, and absorbed the lessons of power. For him, Sinatra was both a mentor and a warning. He admired the man's charisma and talent, but also understood that Sinatra's world was not one to cross lightly. These experiences gave Anka a unique view of show business, a mixture of brilliance, danger, and loyalty that shaped him for life. By the 1970s, Paul Anka once again reinvented himself. He wrote hits for other singers, including Tom Jones's famous "She's a Lady." He also returned to the charts with his own controversial duet, "You're Having My Baby." While the song became a #1 hit, it sparked outrage because of its lyrics, with some critics calling it sexist. Anka shrugged off the criticism, pointing out that the controversy only made the song more famous. Still, fame came at a personal cost. Anka was on the road more than 150 nights a year, often missing important family moments. His first marriage to Ndizogab, a former model, eventually ended after nearly 4 decades together. The balance between career and family proved nearly impossible, and Anka admitted years later that the price of his success was often paid at home. Yet, even in these struggles, he turned personal pain into music. Songs like Times of Your Life captured both nostalgia and regret, connecting deeply with audiences who felt the same pressures of work and family. One of the most surprising chapters of Anka's career came not from a performance, but from a private recording. In the 1980s, a frustrated band member secretly taped Anka during a heated rehearsal. In the recording, Anka could be heard demanding strict discipline, shouting lines like, "The guys get shirts. No t-shirts on my stage. And it's my way or the highway." The tape, which leaked years later, became legendary. Musicians laughed, fans were shocked, and Hollywood even borrowed lines from it for movies. Al Pacino's character in Ocean's 13 repeated some of Anka's exact words, forever tying the rant to pop culture. While some saw it as proof of Anka's ego, others understood it as the passion of a perfectionist who demanded the best. For Anka, it was another reminder that in show business, even private moments can become public. Still, he kept moving forward, writing music for television, performing around the world, and building a reputation not only as a singer, but as a cultural figure whose influence stretched far beyond his own hits. Paul Anka's personal life has been as dramatic as his career. His first marriage to Anne produced 5 daughters, but the constant touring created strain that never healed. After their divorce, Anka remarried, this time to a much younger woman, Anna Berg, a former Miss Universe finalist. They had a son, Ethan, but the relationship quickly turned bitter. Their custody battle became one of the most talked about cases in Hollywood. After years of legal fights, Anka won full custody, something extremely rare for fathers in family courts. The judge even limited the mother's contact, citing the child's wishes. The case highlighted both Anka's determination and the extraordinary resources he could use to fight for his son. Later in life, he married again, hosting a lavish wedding attended by celebrities and business leaders, but that marriage also ended in divorce. Through it all, Anka remained focused on his music and his children, admitting in interviews that while he may have failed in marriage, he always tried to be present as a father, even if his career often pulled him away. In 2013, Paul Anka released his autobiography, My Way. Readers expecting a light, nostalgic memoir were instead met with a raw, unfiltered book filled with shocking confessions. He wrote about wild nights with celebrities, about Michael Jackson asking him for help writing love letters, and even about mob bosses handing him stacks of cash. He revealed moments that others would have kept buried, refusing to cut sections even when lawyers advised him to. For Anka, honesty was part of his legacy. The book sold out quickly, proving that audiences wanted the truth, not just polished stories. Beyond the gossip, however, the book also showed Anka's brilliance as a survivor in an industry where few lasted. He had reinvented himself again and again, moving from teen idol to songwriter, from Vegas star to global legend. He worked with artists across generations, from Sinatra to Michael Jackson to modern singers. His story is not just one of fame, but of resilience, business intelligence, and an unshakable love of music. Now, at 84 years old, Paul Anka continues to perform, record, and share his stories. But what captures the most attention today are his memories of Frank Sinatra. For decades, he stayed silent about the darker truths of that world, the mob connections, the rules of loyalty, and the dangers of crossing powerful men. With age, however, Anka has chosen to speak openly. He has revealed both the brilliance and the flaws of a man he once admired deeply. Sinatra, for all his charm and talent, lived in a world where fear and power often went hand in hand. Anka's willingness to share these truths does not